Welcome back, everyone. I'm Marc DeCourcey, the Senior Vice President of the Chamber Foundation, and I lead its Corporate Citizenship Center. We've got an exciting afternoon in store. First up, we have Acting Secretary Chad Wolf at DHS. We're so fortunate that he can join us this afternoon. We know how busy he is. Just a little bit about him. He has been in the Homeland Security space for over 20 years. Prior to being named Acting Secretary on November 13th, 2019, he was the Undersecretary at DHS. He's also held Chief of Staff and other roles there, including major roles at the TSA. Secretary Wolf has degrees from SMU and Villanova, and we're so thrilled that he's here with us. Let's go right to him now. Secretary Wolf, to you.
Well, great. Appreciate that introduction, Marc. It's certainly an honor to join the Foundation this afternoon to discuss a variety of different ways that we're engaging with our stakeholders to really talk about the future of American economic security. I think it goes without saying that during these unprecedented times, such that we've been in, the department really relies on the partnerships and the relationships with the private sector to secure the homeland. The department can't do it alone. We rely on our partners to keep our nation secure, to ensure safe travel, trade, and the free flow of commerce at the end of the day. Collaborating with private industry partners, like members on this call, is absolutely vital to the mission of the department. In the beginning of 2020, I think our economy was as strong as we've ever seen it, certainly in my lifetime. We had record low unemployment, wages were rising, and we had record high small business optimism. I think it was impossible at that time to predict in just a short period of time, we would be facing a global pandemic that would really bring our economy and the global economy to a near screeching halt. But there's certainly the one thing that defines this country, and it's our resiliency and our ability to overcome a number of challenges that we face. As a result of the president's leadership, our nation, our economy are positioned for one of the greatest comebacks in American history. This comeback, as always, is being delivered by the hands of the American worker, American businesses, and the resilience and ingenuity of the American entrepreneur. So with the help of partners and companies on this call, we've seen record job growth over the last 2 months. As of June, we've managed to create more than 10 million more jobs than the experts predicted. And together, we'll want to continue to build upon that success as we move forward. As we've come to see vividly over the past several months, economic security is homeland security. And so again, thanks to companies on this call and others, our economy remains the strongest in the world despite our recent and ongoing challenges that we face. At DHS, we've been working around the clock to secure our borders from foreign threats while allowing the safe passage and goods coming into our country. Striking this balance is vital to our pandemic response and to simultaneously our economic recovery. As you all know, without law and order, a lot of the commerce can't take place. So the president and the administration has made it very clear regarding the recent lawlessness, particularly against American businesses and communities, will not be tolerated as we move forward. The American people have rejected this chaos. Together, we're rebuilding and strengthening the country again as we move forward. As the mortality rate of the coronavirus continues to drop, DHS understands that we need to keep battling the virus head on and supporting businesses as they open the economy in the safest way possible. Aiding American industry, American workers throughout this crisis is really a departmental priority. The administration understands the pandemic has stressed your supply chains, your communications, and staffing capacities. But it's through successful private-public partnerships that we are meeting this challenge head on. As we confronted the COVID-19 pandemic, CISA, our Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and its partners surged resources to federal, state, local, private sector entities critical in the response. When several departments and agencies saw an uptick in potential malicious activity on their networks, CISA accelerated the deployment of network protection capabilities to HHS, Small Business Administration, to reinforce the security of their important work during this pandemic. CISA, along with our partners, are also providing enhanced services and tailoring threat information to companies affiliated with Operation Warp Speed. As university labs and research institutions and others study and develop vaccine and therapeutics, CISA is helping to provide the cybersecurity to keep their work safe and secure. This is life-saving work, and the department is certainly privileged to support it. Another key example of our partnership with the private sector was on Project Airbridge. And this was an initiative, as many of you have probably read and heard about. It was created to shorten the amount of time it takes for the U.S. medical supply distributors to bring PPE and other critical supplies here to the U.S., specifically to hotspots around the country. These shipments address the immediate shortfall in our nation's PPE needs by arriving 9 times faster than maritime cargo deliveries by sea. They allow distributors to deliver medical supplies, again, to locations of greatest need throughout the country. In addition, companies like Ford and GM stepped up to the fight and delivered ventilators. Others like 3M, Honeywell, and thousands of other small businesses have helped produce PPE that continues to be critical to defeating this virus. As acting DHS Secretary, it was certainly an honor to play a role in the voluntary implementation of the Defense Production Act. Together with FEMA and our private sector partners, we're working to expand the production and the supply of health and medical resources needed to respond to and prevent the future spread of the coronavirus. The DPA provides antitrust protection for participants and the opportunity for DHS and FEMA to leverage private sector expertise to strengthen our national preparedness. This cooperation has been key in mounting an effective response to the virus, and in many ways, it has, when we talk about disrupting our daily life. Through FEMA and other federal agencies, we've processed and distributed nearly 350 million cloth face coverings to critical infrastructure workers. We've done that in support with CISA, with HHS, and with the White House Coronavirus Task Force. We're honored that we can support these heroes again as they keep our economy running during this pandemic. Over the past few months, CISA has also been key in developing that critical infrastructure worker guidance that has been absolutely critical at the beginning of this pandemic, working with many states and other governors, implementing that guidance in their stay-at-home or shelter-in-place plans. And CISA has also seen an uptick, as they've seen an uptick in malicious cyber activity aimed at remote access and teleworking infrastructure. They're putting out guidance to address that as well. So they've launched a dedicated product line intended to advise and support organizations that are surging their telework capabilities. Our goal at the end of the day is for CISA to really be the one-stop shop for telework security guidance to help you, many of the companies on this call and your stakeholders defend against these attacks as they will pop up. Too often, what we've seen is threats really originating from China. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about the threat that the department sees from China and how we're trying to address a number of challenges that we see. The administration has long recognized the threat posed by China to our homeland, as well as to our intellectual property of many of the companies, again, on this call. ICE and CBP, components of DHS, are on the front line of intellectual property rights enforcement, collaborating with industry, other federal agency, and certain foreign governments to fight that cross-border trade of harmful and dangerous illicit goods. China continues to pose the most significant challenge as most counterfeit and unapproved products originate from their shores. Rest assured, every day, CBP and ICE thwarts and apprehends criminals looking to cheat the U.S. government and harm consumers. The administration has been more vigilant in this area than any other administration in recent history. This pandemic has validated much of what we have known to be the threat from China. It's often said that there's nothing more expensive than something that's free or something that's cheap. So continuing to outsource our jobs and manufacturing to a country, to an adversary that we know that steals intellectual property is not a sustainable long-term business model. As a nation, we must be mindful of outsourcing our critical supply chain needs moving forward. Recently, DHS and other federal agencies have issued a business advisory on the risks for companies with supply chain exposure to slave labor and other human rights abuses in China. Together, we've been vigilant in rejecting the use of these materials and ending these practices once and for all. And I think what the pandemic has certainly highlighted is a number of vulnerabilities, such as our reliance on foreign manufacturing and critical supplies and resources that our country needs. This not only hurts us from a national security perspective, but also from an economic perspective. And so we'll continue to encourage companies, again, on this call and others, to continue to invest in the American worker and bring as much manufacturing back to our shores as possible. With all the progress we've made in our economy, there are still millions of Americans who want to get back into the labor market, back into the labor force, and offer their skills and talents to companies, again, like are on this call and elsewhere. During these times like this, we truly, what we truly want to see as our nation, what it's made of, is we'll continue to overcome these challenges posed by China and other nation-state adversaries. America's resilience, at the end of the day, will never be broken. Now, as I conclude my remarks, let me just emphasize that the administration has worked tirelessly to make this economy, this country, secure and appealing to entrepreneurs as possible. Whether it's through the president's tax cuts, its regulatory reform agenda, new deals like the USMCA, or unprecedented stimulus packages, there's never been a more pro-business president who's delivering more on the promises at the end of the day. So let's take advantage of these historic reforms, continue to build a soft, safe, resilient communities right here in the U.S. So with that, let me thank the Chamber. Let me thank the Foundation for, again, the invitation to speak, to address a couple of topics regarding resilience. It's on the top of mind for the department. But most importantly, let me thank all the companies that are on this call for your partnership with the Department of Homeland Security. Securing the homeland is not a mission that the department can do by itself. It takes the partnership with our state and locals, as well as our private sector partners, to do that. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, Marc.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We're so honored to have you here today, and we couldn't agree with you more. Building private-public partnerships is the key to our nation's resiliency. So moving on to our next session, I'll be the moderator for the next one. We'll focus on the role the business community can play during the COVID-19 crisis and how the private sector has adapted. We have a great lineup of speakers, so let me start by introducing them. First, we have Laura Lane, President of Global Public Affairs at UPS. UPS has been a critical supporter of ours here at the Chamber Foundation and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Laura, welcome.
Thank you.
Also, we have Dan Dye, who's the President and CEO of Ardent Mills. In this role, Dan leads an extensive network of more than 40 community flour mills, mixing facilities and bakeries all across the mainland U.S., Puerto Rico, and in Canada. And lastly, we have Vafa Jamali with us. He's the Senior VP and President of Respiratory, Gastrointestinal, and Informatics at Medtronic. Vafa has worked extensively with the White House Coronavirus Task Force, managing ventilator supply for healthcare providers and other facilities. So as a reminder to our audience, before we get started, if you have comments, put them in the chat box. We can get questions to the speakers that way. We'll address many of those as we can. And remember, our virtual platform offers other ways that you can reach out to these speakers and others across our 3 days. So let's get started. First question, and this is for all three of you. During the pandemic, we've seen the business community step up in so many different ways to deliver relief and solutions in real time. And this included retooling your operations. I think for all three of you, this is the challenge on day one, how to shift that production and delivery capabilities overnight to have these much needed supplies end up where they were needed most. In recent memory, as I'm thinking about it, whether for Katrina or Haiti or Sandy or even Maria, there was a stress on demand. But in the pandemic, it was an unlimited demand that we were faced with. How did you do it? Laura, let's start with you. How did UPS meet this challenge?
First and foremost, we recognized that the only way we were going to be able to deliver throughout this pandemic was to ensure that our people were safe. And so our first priority at the outset was getting as much understanding about what this virus entailed and how we needed to keep our people safe. We operate in 220 countries and territories around the world, and one of those countries included China. And so we were one of the first humanitarian relief flights going into China, delivering critical supplies. And in that connection, as we were operating on the mainland, we were learning a lot about what it was going to take to ensure that we were changing our processes and methods so that our people were as safe safe as possible. We knew we wouldn't be immune to the virus, but we knew that we had ways in which we could provide them with all the equipment that they needed and the processes and methods to keep them safe. And then the second thing that we did is we knew that we had to leverage all the relationships we had with governments around the world. If you need to deliver just in time these critical supplies from everywhere around the world to where they were needed, we needed to leverage every relationship that we had at the local, at the state, at the federal, and as well as all the international relationships that we had. And those proved powerful because when government officials were trying to react and respond and keep their own people safe, they were in many ways reacting and putting in place barriers or restrictions that sometimes made it difficult for companies like ours to keep delivering. There's where we leveraged our relationships to explain to them how we could be part of the solution for the countries that we were serving or the communities that we were serving, and indicating how we were going to take the steps so that our people were safe and the communities we were serving would continue to be safe. Then the last thing that we did is we leveraged the power of our multimodal network. When one lane would go down, we'd figure out how to use another lane to ensure that we could keep delivering. So in the air, we would find ways to make sure that we could cross borders. If there were delays in terms of flight movements, we'd move things on the ground. If we couldn't move it on the ground, we'd pop it on the rail. Whatever it took, we learned to be adaptable in real time, leveraging all of our capabilities to be able to ensure that we could deliver. And so that's what UPS does every day. We just had to do it faster, better, and smarter through this pandemic.
Yeah, and Vafa, one of the first things that everyone said we needed more of were PPEs and ventilators, and Medtronic makes those. Tell us about how what was that first phone call like, where you just realized, wow, we're going to have to really step it up?
So thankfully, we had a conversation a little bit before the first phone call, but the issue was there was this growing demand. And then when it became public, it became an absolutely unlimited demand for ventilators. And we knew that, it was a stable market. It had relatively flat growth over years. Medtronic's a manufacturer of critical care ventilators. And we had to sit down and say, okay, how can we double production? And then when we looked at doubling it, it would still nick it just a little bit. So we looked at what could you do if you wanted to multiply that production by 5 and what would be required. And it really required us to sort of put down the old rules and think about what we're going to do to make a safe product. It's a life-saving device, so it's got to be manufactured to perfection. And how can we do it in speed? Where are the places where we could take some probably some inefficiency out of the system? So whether it would be supply chain, which was really, really critical, testing methodologies, getting new partners involved. What can we do to do this? And then the other piece that we did is we got together with the task force and looked at other manufacturers, because we said, if we make unlimited demand supply, we still wouldn't have enough to satisfy the global needs. So we looked at partnering with everybody else to kind of get there. And then equally, what could other partners do, like Intel and SpaceX and Foxconn and these companies that aren't really traditional partners of us in terms of manufacturing, but they did an amazing job of thinking differently, thinking quickly, acting quickly, and becoming really great partners to Medtronic as we sort of built up what, frankly, we didn't think was possible in December, and now we're making 5x what we were making in December. So it was really a change of mindset and a look at totally new ways of approaching a problem that seemed insurmountable at the time, actually.
Yeah, and we talk about retooling, but there's also reallocating. And I think, Dan, you saw this firsthand where the restaurants weren't ordering as much, but the supermarkets needed more. How did Ardent Mills adjust to that reallocation in the supply chain?
Yeah, you're right, Mark. It hit right away where people were starting to, go to the grocery store, doing a little stockpiling, getting food that they needed as this pandemic started to really take hold. And at the same time, like you said, we started to see restaurants closing. So there was this big shift. Similar to what Laura said, our first and foremost effort and really rallying cry was the health and safety of our people, and then working with our customers to keep food on people's tables. And we saw this emerging shift that you mentioned, and we immediately went into action. We leveraged across our 40 facilities. We were able to really service and ramp up to some of our large production companies that are making bread and pasta and other things that are going into the grocery stores, shifting some of the activity that would have gone more targeted towards restaurants, for example. And really probably the biggest shift and the biggest impact was on the retail small pack flour itself. We only have about 6 or 7 of our facilities across our network that pack retail flour. And so we saw that demand just explode. I mean, literally 5 to 10 times orders of what you would normally get. As people were recognizing, you know what, we're going to be at home. We want to bake together. It became a comfort. It became a constant, something that brought families together. And we're running out of flour on the store shelves. So we shifted quickly to ramp up production, to streamline. For example, we stopped making 2-pound and 10-pound bags of flour and just went with 5 pounds so that we could increase production. It simplified things for our grocery store customers. And it really allowed other ways to really drive different ways of tackling the problem, new packaging, transportation shifts, and so forth. And I think all of those things then created, even though there were some shortages still, we were able to keep the supply chain flowing.
So true. And look, we can't do it together. We can't do it alone either, right? We need partners. And Laura, you mentioned this in the beginning. Can we talk a little bit more, as you know, this is a private-public partnership conference, but what really those partnerships mean, both at the federal, state, and local level. I imagine, Vafa, you had to deal with FDA inspectors, Dan, Department of Ag inspectors, Laura, Custom and Border people, not just here in the U.S., but everywhere around the world. You can't just meet them for the first time. You need to have a good working relationship. And as we have a whole session here full of many state and local officials as well as federal officials, what's the magic in this? How do you make it work now so when something really terrible happens like COVID-19, it doesn't become an obstacle? Laura, do you want to talk about that for just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The relationships that we'd already built before became consequential through COVID-19. Think about, everybody knows our UPS drivers, they love to see them delivering, but think about everything else it requires to keep a network going. Our IT people are essential because with every package that's delivered goes data. Think about all of the customs operations that we had to keep running. They weren't in Browns all the time, but we had to make sure we were filling out all the declarations, moving things quickly through the clearance process to get them delivered. And that meant that we really had to work every relationship that we built before the crisis started. And we'd already established those relationships of trust so that when we went to the mayors and said, listen, we're going to have some IT people, they're going to be driving in and out and not following those stay-at-home orders. We're going to make sure that they're masked up and that they're following all the protocols, but we need to make sure that they're keeping our network running so that our package cars can keep delivering. And we just made sure that throughout this pandemic that we were in constant communication. If we weren't sending regular updates about how the operations were going, we were calling them and informing them what was working and what wasn't working. And most importantly, we were solving problems with them. So many of these government officials were doing the best jobs that they could, dealing with a virus that had so much uncertainty built into it. We wanted to be partners with them, solving the problems with them. So that as we were learning, for example, about challenges that they were having of their own in terms of how do we ensure that school kids stay fed? How do we ensure that, we're keeping store shelves stocked? We were working with them in partnership, standing up the solutions so that, that the flour was on the shelves and the ventilators were being delivered. We were letting them know about our capabilities so that we were all working in this seamless communications loop. Anytime a problem emerged, we talked about our capabilities and we worked together to deliver results. That's the power of relationships and the power of partnerships, especially in times like these.
Yeah, exactly. And Vafa, tell us about when you did scale up. What different functions of government did you have to work with to get to the permissions to do what you had to do and make things better and quicker?
So permissions were actually relatively easy. I mean, the agency, the FDA.
Yes. Or no? Okay.
The FDA was excellent in terms of just making it very simple to move forward. So I thought the agency was terrific with us. The government's the issue with every single government was calling to demand more product or request more product, I should say, and how we decided to allocate that, was really critical, Mark. I mean, even if you didn't have the relationships before, like typically we were dealing with heads of states, but we were in this case, and you have to have a high level of empathy, high level of listening skills, and you need to communicate with great transparency in a sense that here's what we can make, here's how we're deciding to allocate based on clinical need, et cetera, and make it so that it was very easy for everybody to say yes and come and participate. And one great example was New York, and for America, that was the epicenter of where it all went for us at the beginning, anyways. And standing up the Javits Center, which was essentially a convention center that we helped the agency turn into basically a stand-up hospital in very short order, something that would take us months to get regulatory. We were up over a weekend and we had that up and running. So you can't do that with very good communication, incredible trust, incredible partnership with all agencies and all governments involved. So that was actually one really great part of this whole thing. If there is anything, was just, with a common goal, people really do move in the same direction and can find a lot of mutual acceptance and a lot of mutual goals that really help us move way faster than we would if we had to prove that to one another. So that was one positive light of it. It's very simple ability to move forward.
And Dan, over to you. Inspectors, both on the road and in your mills, you knew them before, but you needed their help this time to do the things that you wanted to do. Are there any learnings there that you can share with our audience?
Yeah, I think there was, like has been said, the relationships you build ahead of these times are really important, and so that certainly helped. But to do things differently, we had different inspections where you had to do some of that virtually, or working again with transportation folks and getting approvals and trade associations and others that really became critical partners. And again, those relationships were really valued. And I'll highlight another one, Mark, too. What we found when we had our first positive case at one of our plants, one of our biggest concerns was we wanted to make sure we kept our plants running, kept our people safe, kept our plants running. We had our first positive. We reached out to the local health officials because they were key in letting us continue to operate or managing through the case. And what we learned from that is then we went to every single one of our plants and we made that contact and built that relationship with the local officials there to say, hey, if something does happen, we want to build those relationships. So whether it was with government inspectors or whether it was with local health officials, all of those relationships are so critical. And I just think it proves the value of these public-private partnerships and how we work through these hard times together. That's when we're strongest. That's when we do the best and are able to manage through the difficulties by leaning on each other and getting ideas and inputs and learnings, and then finding different ways to build on the relationships that you have.
Yeah. And this is for all of you. And a borderless disaster like a pandemic. There are some places, whether it's a country or a state or even a municipality, who did a really great job, who thought ahead and did the right thing and engaged the private sector. Could any of the three of you give us just a few examples of looking back saying, wow, that is a best practice? And I say that because of the people who are listening to us. The number one thing we always hear from our partners is, tell us who's getting it done right. Can you just share just a few stories? Vafa, why don't we start with you of a government partner anywhere in the world that just got it right, and what can we learn from them?
Well, I can keep it here. I mean, one of the conversations we had with FEMA was how should we allocate these ventilators? So everyone had unlimited demand, And what I thought we did really well is we had great discussion, Colonel Work, a number of other people that were on his team, and we talked about, if we built a model that was clinically acceptable to everybody, that we would move product to where it's acute. So very different than normally where you would put in wherever you got the order, wherever you got the highest pressure, wherever you'd allocate. We flattened all that and we said we would move it to highest acuity. And the agreement that we got from the government was that, we think that you guys are doing this right, and I think if you can keep continuing, we don't need to interfere with what you're doing. And I thought that was a really great example of just a mutual understanding of what I can do well and what you can do well, and then letting the rest of it kind of play out where people are experts. So I can keep the praise right here, and I thought that was done exceptionally well in the height of it all.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate all the work that our federal government has done, and our partners at Keynote especially. And each company itself has its own superpower. And Laura, UPS's superpower is pretty self-evident.
Field.
But tell us another superpower that you saw out there that perhaps we should replicate.
The superpower of UPSers, it's courage, determination, and commitment. I was blown away. We have almost 500,000 employees around the world. Not any one of them said, that they weren't, proud to be showing up every day. They knew that they had a mission. There's this wonderful quote I share with all the UPSers. It's about Ronald Reagan's quote about how people wonder if they made a difference in the world. And Ronald Reagan said, Marines don't have that problem. I've argued UPSers don't have that problem, because our superpower was our incredible courage, our commitment to making sure that we delivered, and we delivered safely and just in time. And that determination that no matter the obstacle, we were going to find a way to solve the problems. And so everybody thought we were United Parcel Service. We became United Problem Solvers, because there were challenges in supply chains, there were challenges at borders, and governments were trying to make the best decisions that they could. And sometimes it created problems, but when we worked back with every one of those government officials in partnership with our courageous UPSers, there wasn't a problem we couldn't solve. I've always believed that the answer to solving a lot of the challenges that our country and the global community has faced throughout this pandemic and going forward are always going to be solved through great logistics. And our UPSers are committed to continuing to deliver that. And I will share, just because the acting secretary talked about it at the outset, we were so proud to be part of Project Airbridge, because we knew what it meant in terms of getting consequential supplies to where they were needed most to help contain the virus. And we're going to be so proud to be part of Operation Warp Speed, to be able to help deliver the vaccines once they're ready for rollout, so that we can put this pandemic behind us, because of the innovation and solutions that great companies, particularly in the pharmaceutical space, are putting together for all of us. So back to you.
Great. No, thank you. And Dan, I'm going to give you the last word as we need to wrap up. The role of business in society. As a CEO, what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a responsibility, and more than that, an obligation to do the right thing, to step in. I mean, companies have incredible resources, they have incredible talent, and they need to put that to work, not just to make money, not just for their own company goals, but they need to do it for the best and the good of society and overall. And I think we've heard, from Laura and Vafa, I mean, it's inspiring, right, to see what companies can do when there's a crisis and a difficult time. And I think it's a lesson to us as organizations, as leaders in organizations, that we need to look beyond our borders, and we need to do what's right and make a difference. And we pride ourselves in living by our vision, our values, and our mission. And that really served us well during this time. And we look at our mission as enhancing the quality of life and standard of health with great food products. And we took that seriously. And I can tell you, our essential workers, those folks that came to the plant every day, took pride in really helping the communities and getting food out. And I know in other organizations that's true. So I think take that responsibility and really turn it to an obligation to do what's right, to help, to come alongside, and to partner. I think that's our role in society, especially during crisis.
Couldn't agree more. Dan, Vafa, Laura, thank you so much. And thank you for all you and your companies are doing to help us during this crisis. Now we want to move on. We've got our final breakout sessions of the day. And even though today's programming is going to conclude with these breakout sessions, we've got 2 more days of content that's timely, it's engaging, and we want to find ways that you can collaborate. So tomorrow's conference theme is supporting lives and livelihoods. Our speakers are going to discuss ways to alleviate the impact of COVID-19 on our communities, where we face this largest economic and social crisis of our lifetime. So we look forward to having you tomorrow morning. When we come back, we have Build Strong up, and there you have a 2-hour session that is going to be fantastic. You don't want to miss it. They were partners with us last year, and we're so happy they're again with us this year. And between then and now, we've got some breakout sessions with more great content. Thanks for joining us today.